A police dog barks furiously at a man carrying a little girl. When police uncover the truth, it's horrifying. In a seemingly peaceful neighborhood, an innocent moment quickly turns into a chilling nightmare. What sinister secrets are hidden behind this man's facade? Join us as we unravel a story that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about safety and trust. In a peaceful suburban neighborhood, the sun bathed the streets in a golden glow, casting long shadows and illuminating the vibrant colors of blooming flowers in every yard. Laughter and joy echoed from behind white picket fences, children played freely, and the scent of freshly cut grass filled the air. Officer Sarah Mitchell patrolled her usual route, her loyal companion Rex, a German shepherd with an unparalleled instinct for danger, by her side. Today seemed like any other ordinary day, but Officer Mitchell knew that darkness often lurks behind a bright facade, waiting for the right moment to strike. The streets were quiet, save for the rhythmic sound of Rex's paws padding against the pavement. Sarah took a moment to appreciate the tranquility of the neighborhood. She greeted the familiar faces of neighbors watering their gardens or chatting on their porches, all blissfully unaware of the unease that was beginning to settle in the pit of her stomach. It was a feeling she couldn't quite shake, a sense that something was amiss in the atmosphere. Suddenly, Rex's demeanor shifted dramatically. He stood rigid, ears perked, and unleashed a furious bark that shattered the peaceful ambiance. Officer Mitchell's heart raced as she turned to see a man, Mark, striding down the sidewalk. He was carrying a little girl named Emily, who looked no older than 5, cradled in his arms. The child's innocent face, filled with trust and curiosity, sharply contrasted with the man's nervous, darting eyes and the sheen of sweat glistening on his forehead. Officer Mitchell felt a chill run down her spine. Something was deeply wrong. As she moved closer, the tension in the air became palpable. Mark's anxious smile did little to reassure her. Instead, it sent alarm bells ringing in her mind. Why was he carrying the girl? Why was there a wild look in his eyes? Was he in danger, or was he the source of it? Rex growled lowly, his body tense, and Sarah knew she had to act swiftly. This was more than just a simple encounter. It was a moment that could change everything. Officer Mitchell approached with caution, her instincts honed from years of experience. "Excuse me, sir," she called out, her voice steady but firm. "Is everything all right? Where are you taking that little girl?" Mark hesitated, his eyes darting around as if searching for an escape route. We're just heading to the park," he stammered, his voice shaky, betraying his unease. "She's my niece. We were playing, and I thought I'd carry her for a bit." But Officer Mitchell wasn't convinced. The way he clutched Emily was too tight, too protective, and the little girl's wide eyes seemed to speak of confusion and fear. "Can I ask for your ID?" she pressed, stepping forward, her hand resting on her holster. Mark's expression shifted, panic flashing across his face as he realized the gravity of the situation. I left it at home," he stuttered, backing away slightly. "Rex, stay," Sarah commanded, feeling the tension in the air thicken. The dog obeyed, but his low growl echoed the unease she felt. The officer knew that she had to defuse the situation quickly. With each heartbeat, Officer Mitchell felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. She had to protect Emily, and she had to uncover the truth behind the man before her. But little did Officer Mitchell know, this incident was just the beginning of a horrifying revelation that would shake her to the core, unraveling a web of secrets that would lead far beyond this seemingly innocent encounter. The tension hung in the air like a thick fog, stifling and oppressive. Officer Sarah Mitchell stood her ground, Her keen eyes locked onto Mark as he shifted nervously. The warmth of the sun felt distant now, overshadowed by the weight of the moment. Emily, still cradled in his arms, looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes that seemed to plead for reassurance. The innocent trust of a child in the grasp of someone whose intentions were increasingly doubtful created a stark contrast that sent chills down Sarah's spine. "Mark," Sarah said, her voice steady but firm, cutting through the mounting tension. "You need to put the girl down. I want to make sure she's okay. You can't just carry her like this without an explanation." Her words were measured, each syllable carefully chosen to convey both authority and concern. Mark's face paled, and his grip on Emily tightened, causing the little girl to squirm uncomfortably against him. "I told you she's my niece. We were just playing hide and seek. I was carrying her back home." His voice rose, tinged with desperation and fear, as he glanced around the street for any potential escape route, his eyes darting like a trapped animal seeking a way out. "Then let her go," Sarah insisted, taking a small step closer, her heart pounding in her chest. "If everything is fine, there's no reason you can't set her down. I'm here to help you." The grounded authority in her voice was a protective barrier, intent on ensuring the girl's safety above all else. Emily's small hands reached out toward Sarah, sensing the tension and uncertainty that surrounded them. "I want to go home, Uncle Mark," she said softly, her voice trembling with confusion and fear. It broke Sarah's heart to see a child caught in such a precarious situation, her innocent plea echoing louder than any words spoken by the adult in the equation. Mark hesitated, the flicker of doubt crossing his face. For just a moment, Sarah saw a glimpse of fear behind his bravado. Fear of being exposed, of being caught in a lie he couldn't escape. This brief moment of vulnerability reinforced Sarah's resolve. She took a deep breath, trying to project calmness in the face of rising chaos. "Listen," she continued, her tone softening slightly. "If you're innocent, just let her go. You can't keep her like this. We can talk and I can help you." She watched as Mark's expression shifted, the panic beginning to take over as the sound of distant sirens grew louder, cutting through the tension like a knife. "Please, Mark," she urged, her voice steady yet filled with compassion. "If you're scared, I can help. Just let her down." At that moment, Mark's eyes widened in panic as the sirens drew closer, and he took a step back, his body poised as if ready to flee. I can't," he shouted, the fear in his voice rising. "You don't understand." Before Sarah could react, he made a sudden movement, turning away from her and sprinting down the sidewalk, clutching Emily tightly against his chest as if she were a shield against the world. "Stop!" Sarah shouted, adrenaline surging through her veins. Rex barked furiously, ready to pursue, and without a second thought, Sarah took off after them, her instincts kicking into high gear. "Rex, go!" she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. The dog sprang forward, his powerful legs propelling him ahead as he chased after Mark. The chase unfolded through the quiet streets, past startled neighbors who watched with wide eyes, unsure of what was happening. As they rounded a corner, Mark glanced back, his expression a mix of fear and determination. Sarah's breath came in quick gasps as she closed the distance, her focus narrowing on him and the little girl he still held. "Let her go!" she shouted again, though the words felt like they were swallowed by the wind. Mark's footsteps faltered as he reached the edge of a nearby park, his eyes darting around for an escape route. The park was empty except for a few scattered picnic tables and a jungle gym, but it provided plenty of places to hide. A sense of urgency flooded Sarah's senses. She knew she had to act quickly before he vanished into the shadows. "Listen, Mark," Sarah called, trying to keep her voice steady despite the chaos. "This is your last chance. You can't run forever. Just let her go." In that moment of confrontation, it was clear to Sarah that the stakes were higher than she had initially thought. This was not just a situation involving a lost child. It was a frantic struggle for safety, trust, and the fight against shadows of doubt that loomed over them all. Mark stood at the park's edge, torn between fear and desperation, sweat trickling down his brow as he weighed his options. Sarah could see the internal battle raging within him, and she knew she had to exploit that moment of hesitation. "I'm not going to hurt you," she said, her voice softening. "I just want to make sure Emily is safe. You have nothing to fear if you let her go." Mark's breath came in ragged gasps, and for a heartbeat, it seemed like he might comply. But then the panic in his eyes flared back to life. "Stay away from us," he yelled, backing toward the trees that bordered the park, his back against the rough bark as he sought a barrier between himself and the officer. With a final burst of speed, Sarah reached Rex, and together they closed in on Mark. Just as he turned to disappear into the underbrush, she shouted, "Rex, stay!" The dog halted, waiting for her command, his body tense and ready, a perfect embodiment of loyalty and strength. "Mark!" Sarah's voice cut through the air, commanding attention. "This is your last chance. You can't keep running. Just let her go. We can talk about this." In that moment, the world around them seemed to fade away, leaving only the three of them in a tense standoff. The distant sound of sirens grew nearer, a reminder that help was on the way. But would it arrive in time to prevent a tragedy? As Mark stood there, torn between fear and the instinct to protect Emily, Sarah prepared for whatever might come next. She had a duty to protect the little girl at all costs, and she was willing to face the shadows head-on, determined to uncover the truth that lay hidden beneath the surface. The air crackled with potential danger, and she steeled herself for what might be the defining moment of her career. The park was eerily silent, the distant sounds of the city fading away as the confrontation unfolded. Officer Sarah Mitchell stood firm, her heart racing as she faced Mark, who was backed against the rough bark of a towering oak tree, his eyes reflecting a mix of fear and determination. Emily, still cradled in his arms, looked small and vulnerable, her wide eyes darting between the two adults as if she could sense the impending storm brewing around her. The innocence of childhood was starkly juxtaposed against the chaos enveloping them, amplifying the urgency of the situation. "Mark?" Sarah said, her voice steady yet laced with urgency. "You need to put the girl down. I want to make sure she's okay. You can't just carry her like this without an explanation." The words poured out with a mix of authority and compassion, an attempt to reach the man standing before her, to break through the walls he had erected around himself. Mark's face paled, and his grip on Emily tightened, causing the little girl to squirm uncomfortably against him. "I told you, she's my niece. We were just playing hide and seek. I was carrying her back home." His voice rose, tinged with desperation and fear. As he glanced around the street for any potential escape route, his eyes darting like a trapped animal seeking a way out. Sweat glistened on his forehead, and Sarah could see the muscles in his jaw clenching and unclenching in agitation. "Then let her go," Sarah insisted, taking a cautious step closer, her heart pounding in her chest. "If everything is fine, there's no reason you can't set her down. I'm here to help you." The grounded authority in her voice was a protective barrier, intent on ensuring the girl's safety above all else. Emily's small hands reached out toward Sarah, sensing the tension and uncertainty that surrounded them. "I want to go home, Uncle Mark," she said softly, her voice trembling with confusion and fear. The sight of the little girl's innocent plea broke Sarah's heart, and she felt a surge of determination to protect her. Mark hesitated, the flicker of doubt crossing his face. For just a moment, Sarah saw a glimpse of fear behind his bravado. Fear of being exposed, of being caught in a lie he couldn't escape. This brief moment of vulnerability reinforced Sarah's resolve. She took a deep breath, trying to project calmness in the face of rising chaos. "Listen," she continued, her tone softening slightly. "If you're innocent, just let her go. You can't keep her like this. We can talk and I can help you." She watched as Mark's expression shifted, the panic beginning to take over as the sound of distant sirens grew louder, cutting through the tension like a knife. "Please, Mark," she urged, her voice steady yet filled with compassion. "If you're scared, I can help. Just let her down." At that moment, Mark's eyes widened in panic as the sirens drew closer, and he took a step back, his body poised as if ready to flee. I can't," he shouted, the fear in his voice rising. "You don't understand." Before Sarah could react, he made a sudden movement, turning away from her and sprinting down the sidewalk, clutching Emily tightly against his chest as if she were a shield against the world. "Stop!" Sarah shouted, adrenaline surging through her veins. Rex barked furiously, ready to pursue, and without a second thought, Sarah took off after them, her instincts kicking into high gear. "Rex, go!" she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. The dog sprang forward, his powerful legs propelling him ahead as he chased after Mark. The chase unfolded through the quiet streets, past startled neighbors who watched with wide eyes, unsure of what was happening. As they rounded a corner, Mark glanced back, his expression a mix of fear and determination. Sarah's breath came in quick gasps as she closed the distance, her focus narrowing on him and the little girl he still held. "Let her go," she shouted again, though the words felt like they were swallowed by the wind. Mark's footsteps faltered as he reached the edge of a nearby park, his eyes darting around for an escape route. The park was empty except for a few scattered picnic tables and a jungle gym, but it provided plenty of places to hide. A sense of urgency flooded Sarah's senses. She knew she had to act quickly before he vanished into the shadows. "Listen, Mark," Sarah called, trying to keep her voice steady despite the chaos. "This is your last chance. You can't run forever. Just let her go." In that moment of confrontation, it was clear to Sarah that the stakes were higher than she had initially thought. This was not just a situation involving a lost child. It was a frantic struggle for safety, trust, and the fight against shadows of doubt that loomed over them all. Mark stood at the park's edge, torn between fear and desperation, sweat trickling down his brow as he weighed his options. Sarah could see the internal battle raging within him, and she knew she had to exploit that moment of hesitation. "I'm not going to hurt you," she said, her voice softening. "I just want to make sure Emily is safe. If you let her go, I promise we'll figure this out together." Mark's breath came in ragged gasps, and for a heartbeat, it seemed like he might comply. Mark's grip on Emily loosened slightly, and Sarah sensed a glimmer of hope. But then the panic returned, and he shook his head violently. "No, I can't. I won't let them take her." Suddenly, without warning, he took a step back toward the trees, preparing to disappear into the underbrush. "Mark, stop!" Sarah shouted, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. She knew she had to act fast. The moment hung in the balance, a fragile thread waiting to snap. Just then, Rex, sensing the rising tension, lunged forward with a low growl, ready to protect his handler and the little girl. "Rex, stay," Sarah commanded, but the dog was already on high alert, sensing the imminent danger. In a desperate bid, Sarah reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. "I'm calling for backup," she announced, hoping to draw Mark's attention back to her. "If you don't let her go, things are going to get a lot worse for you." Mark hesitated again, his eyes darting back to Emily, who was looking more frightened than ever. "You don't understand. They'll take her away from me if they find out." His voice cracked, a mixture of desperation and fear spilling forth. "Who is they? Is someone trying to take her? We can protect you both, but you have to cooperate," Sarah urged, her mind racing to find a way to connect with him. "I can't help you if you don't let me in. Please." At that moment, a rustling sound came from the bushes nearby, and both Sarah and Mark turned instinctively toward the noise. The air was thick with tension as they waited, hearts pounding. It was then that Sarah realized she was not just facing an unstable man. They were at the precipice of something much larger, something that could involve dangerous people who posed a real threat to both of them. "Mark, listen to me," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling around them. "Whatever is happening, you don't have to face it alone. We can figure this out, together. Just put Emily down and let's talk." Mark's eyes filled with tears, the weight of his fear and confusion crashing over him like waves. "I can't," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Start with what you can," Sarah encouraged, her heart racing as she sensed the shift in the air. The sirens were closer now, and she knew help was on the way. But first, she had to get to the bottom of this mystery, whatever it was that had driven Mark to this desperate point. As Emily's eyes filled with tears, she looked up at her uncle, sensing his turmoil. "Please don't be scared, Uncle Mark," she said softly, her small voice breaking through the tension. "I just want to go home and play with my toys." The innocence of her words struck a chord deep within Mark. He looked down at Emily, who was now clutching a small stuffed bunny in her arms, her eyes pleading for her uncle to listen. "Please, Uncle Mark," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to go home." The plea from the child seemed to pierce through the fog of fear surrounding Mark. He hesitated, his expression wavering as he fought against the instinct to protect her at all costs. "I don't know who to trust anymore," he admitted, his voice filled with anguish. "Trust me," Sarah urged, stepping closer, her heart racing. "I'm a police officer, and my job is to protect you both. If you let her go, I promise we'll figure this out together." Slowly, almost reluctantly, Mark began to lower Emily, his grip loosening just enough for her to slip down to the ground. Sarah knelt beside the little girl, her heart aching at the sight of Emily's frightened face. "You're safe now, sweetheart," she said, her voice gentle as she brushed a strand of hair away from Emily's forehead. As Emily stepped away from Mark, she looked up at Sarah with wide, trusting eyes. "Can we go home?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes, we will," Sarah promised, her gaze shifting back to Mark, who stood frozen, caught in the crossfire of his own fear and despair. "But first, we need to talk. You need to tell me everything." Mark's shoulders sagged, the weight of his decision settling in. I don't know if I can," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Start with what you can," Sarah pressed, sensing the urgency of the situation. She needed to uncover the truth before the sirens arrived and the moment slipped away. "What are you afraid of? Why were you running?" Mark looked around the park, his eyes filled with a mix of anguish and determination. "I'm afraid they'll take her away from me," he said slowly, his voice trembling. "I've already lost so much. I can't lose her too." The shadows of doubt danced around them, thickening the air as the sirens drew nearer. Sarah knew that the police would soon arrive, and she needed to gather as much information as possible before they did. "Who are they?" she asked, leaning in closer, her voice low and urgent. "Is someone threatening you? Is there someone after you?" Mark's gaze dropped to the ground, shame washing over his features. "I made some bad choices," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I got involved with people who don't care about anyone but themselves. They want something from me, and if they find me, they won't hesitate to take Emily away too." "Why would they take her?" Sarah pressed, trying to maintain focus on the matter at hand. "What do they want?" "They think I know where a stash of money is hidden, money that belongs to them," Mark replied, his voice shaking. "I was just trying to keep us safe, but I'm in over my head. I didn't want them to get to her." As the weight of Mark's confession settled in the air, Sarah felt a surge of compassion mixed with anger. "You're not alone in this," she said firmly. "We can help you, but you need to cooperate." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed through the park, and Sarah turned to see two uniformed officers approaching, their expressions serious as they assessed the situation. "Officer Mitchell," one of them called, concern etched on his face. "What's going on here?" Mark's eyes widened with fear as he realized help had arrived, but it was also a potential threat. "No, I can't go with them," he shouted, panic rising in his voice. "Mark, listen to me," Sarah said, stepping between him and the approaching officers. "You need to calm down. They're here to help, but you have to cooperate. You can't run away anymore." The two officers halted, watching the scene unfold with a mixture of confusion and concern. "Is everything all right?" one of them asked, glancing at Sarah for guidance. "Not yet," she replied, her eyes locked onto Mark's. "But we're getting there. Just trust me, Mark. We can get through this together." As the sirens faded into the background, the park was filled with a tense silence, the air charged with uncertainty. But amid the shadows of doubt, a flicker of hope began to emerge. It was a chance for redemption, a possibility for safety, and a path forward that they could navigate together. If only Mark could find the courage to take that first step. The police station was a labyrinth of controlled chaos, fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across worn linoleum floors that had witnessed countless stories of desperation and redemption. Sarah Mitchell sat across from Mark in a small interrogation room, its sterile environment a stark contrast to the emotional storm brewing between them. A manila folder lay open, its contents spread out like a constellation of interconnected secrets, waiting to be deciphered. The room carried the faint smell of stale coffee and institutional cleaner, a backdrop to the most critical moment of Mark's life. Outside, the city continued its relentless rhythm, unaware of the pivotal conversation unfolding within these walls. Sarah pushed a styrofoam cup of coffee toward Mark, her movements deliberate and calculated. "Start from the beginning," she urged, her voice a careful balance of professional detachment and genuine compassion. Mark looked like a man who had been dragged through hell. His clothes wrinkled, his face etched with lines of worry and exhaustion that seemed to have aged him decades in mere months. Emily's safety weighed heavily on both of their minds. The little girl was currently in the care of social services, a temporary solution that felt anything but permanent to Mark. He could imagine her small frame, her stuffed bunny clutched tightly, wondering why her uncle wasn't with her. Mark's hands trembled as he wrapped them around the coffee cup, finding momentary comfort in its warmth. "It started 6 months ago," he began, his voice a raspy whisper that seemed to carry the weight of his entire world. "I was working as a delivery driver for a logistics company. Nothing special, just another job trying to keep my head above water after losing my position at the factory." The story of economic struggle was one Sarah had heard countless times. Good people backed into corners, making increasingly desperate choices. "The factory closure was brutal," Mark continued, a distant look in his eyes. 300 workers let go overnight. No warning, no severance, just a pink slip and a handshake. He took a shaky sip of coffee, the liquid doing little to calm his nerves. "I had bills piling up. Emily's school expenses, the mortgage, everything was falling apart." Sarah listened intently, her pen moving almost imperceptibly across her notebook. She recognized the narrative. Desperation was often the first step toward compromise. "Then I met Carlos," Mark said, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "He approached me after delivery, said he had a way for me to make some real money. Quick cash, he called it." The name hung in the air, laden with implications. "Tell me about Carlos," Sarah prompted, her voice steady. Mark's fingers traced nervous patterns on the styrofoam cup. Mid-40s, well-dressed, always wearing these expensive Italian shoes. The kind of guy who looks like he could be a successful businessman. But you know something's off. He looked up, meeting Sarah's eyes. He had this way of talking, smooth, calculated. Made everything sound reasonable, even when it wasn't. The first meeting played out in Mark's memory like a film reel. Carlos, impeccably dressed, leaning against a sleek black SUV in the delivery company's parking lot. The initial conversation had been casual, almost friendly. "What did he want initially?" Sarah asked, watching Mark's reactions carefully. "Small deliveries," Mark responded. "Packages sealed, no questions asked. Seemed harmless at first. An extra $100 here, 200 there. When you're struggling, it's hard to say no." His voice carried a mixture of shame and residual desperation. Sarah understood the psychology all too well. Economic pressure could turn good people into unwitting participants in dangerous schemes. How quickly did things escalate? Mark's laugh was hollow. "Faster than I expected. First, it was just moving packages, then specific instructions. Don't open this, don't ask questions, just deliver." Each delivery got more complex, more risky. The interrogation room seemed to grow smaller, the weight of Mark's confession pressing against the walls. Sarah could see the internal struggle etched into every line of his face. A man caught between survival and moral compromise, between protecting his family and maintaining his integrity. "The packages changed," Mark continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "From simple sealed boxes to encrypted drives, digital files, bank records, information that could destroy people. I didn't realize how deep I was getting until it was too late." Sarah leaned forward, her professional demeanor masking the growing tension. "What kind of information are we talking about?" Mark's hands started to shake. "Financial records showing money laundering, connections between local politicians, business leaders, and what looked like organized crime networks. The kind of information that could bring down entire systems." The implications were massive. This was no longer just about a struggling delivery driver. This was potentially a systemic corruption case that could shake the city's foundations. "And Emily?" Sarah asked, her voice soft but direct. Pain erupted across Mark's face, raw and unfiltered. "My sister, her death was no accident," he said suddenly, the words tumbling out like a dam breaking. "Carlos made sure I understood. One wrong move, and Emily could disappear into the system. Or worse." Outside the interrogation room, Detective Rodriguez watched through the two-way mirror, his experienced eyes catching every nuance of the conversation. "This goes deeper than we thought," he muttered to the forensic analyst beside him. "If he's telling the truth," the analyst responded, "we're looking at a case that could rewrite everything we know about local criminal networks." Back in the room, Mark continued to talk, and with each word, a dangerous, intricate story began to unfold. A story that would challenge everything they thought they knew about corruption, survival, and the lengths a person would go to protect the ones they love. The city outside continued its relentless rhythm, unaware that within these institutional walls, a narrative was being written that would change everything. The atmosphere in the police station had shifted dramatically. As Mark's revelations hung in the air, Sarah felt a growing sense of urgency. What started as a simple case of child endangerment had transformed into a potential exposure of a significant criminal network. The stakes were higher than ever, and time was running out. After several hours of intense questioning, Mark leaned back in his chair, visibly drained. The fluorescent lights above flickered intermittently, casting restless shadows that danced across the worn table between them. "I never wanted any of this," he said, his voice a mix of exhaustion and despair. "I just wanted to provide for Emily after my sister passed. I thought I was doing the right thing." "Mark, you need to understand that this is not just about you anymore," Sarah said, her tone firm yet compassionate. "You're in a position to help us dismantle something dangerous. If you cooperate fully, we can keep both you and Emily safe." Mark ran a hand through his hair, his face a mask of conflict and uncertainty. "What do you want to know?" he asked, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "Everything," Sarah replied, leaning forward. "Every name, every location, every connection you have with Carlos and the syndicate. We need to build a case, and we need you to be our primary witness." He hesitated, glancing toward the one-way mirror, as if sensing unseen eyes watching him. "I can't just expose them," he insisted. "They'll come after us. Carlos has people everywhere. He's connected. If I talk, I'm putting Emily's life at risk." "We'll protect you both," Sarah assured him, her voice steady and reassuring. "But you need to give us the information first. If we know who we're dealing with, we can plan accordingly." Mark took a deep breath, the weight of the decision bearing down on him. "Okay," he finally said, a steely resolve settling in his features. "I'll tell you everything I know." As he began to recount the details, Sarah scribbled notes furiously, her mind racing to piece together the puzzle. Mark described Carlos's operations, the intricate web of contacts that extended beyond their local neighborhood, reaching into the city's political landscape and beyond. "There are meetings in abandoned warehouses, deals struck in the dark. They think they're untouchable," he said, his voice shaking with both fear and anger. "Do you have any specific locations?" Sarah asked, her heart pounding with the urgency of the moment. This was the information they needed to launch an investigation that could break the syndicate apart. "Yeah," Mark replied, his brow furrowing in concentration. "One place is an old shipping yard on the east side. They use it to move goods in and out without drawing attention. I've delivered packages there before, and I've seen how they operate." "Can you give me a date?" Sarah pressed, eager to establish a timeline that could anchor their investigation. About 3 weeks ago, Mark recalled, his mind racing back through the haze of fear and adrenaline. I dropped off a package that had to be handled delicately. I overheard some conversations, talk about shipments, money, names of people I didn't recognize. Names? Sarah's pen paused, her heart racing with anticipation. Did you hear anything specific? Just a few, Mark said, shaking his head as memories flooded back. There was mention of a guy named Victor. He's supposed to be the muscle for the operation, and there's another guy, a tech whiz called Sam. They handle the logistics, the data, everything. They're the ones who keep this whole thing running. The more Mark spoke, the clearer the picture became. Sarah felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. They were on the brink of something monumental, but with that came the pressing danger of exposing a powerful network that had evaded law enforcement for far too long. Victor and Sam, Sarah repeated, jotting down their names with urgency. What do they look like? Anything distinctive? Victor's tall and built like a tank, Mark described, his eyes narrowing as he recalled the imposing figure. He has this tattoo on his forearm. Looks like a snake coiling around a dagger. It's pretty noticeable, and he uses it to intimidate people. Sam is younger, maybe in his late 20s, always glued to his phone. Slight build, but he's the brains behind the tech side. I've seen him hack into systems while we were waiting for deliveries. The more Mark described the inner workings of the syndicate, the more Sarah's mind raced with the implications. This was no longer just about a struggling delivery driver caught in a web of crime. This was about a systemic corruption that could reach into the heart of city politics and law enforcement. And Emily? Sarah asked, her voice softening as she looked into Mark's eyes. What about her safety? Pain erupted across Mark's face, raw and unfiltered. My sister. Her death was no accident, he said suddenly, the words tumbling out like a dam breaking. Carlos made sure I understood. One wrong move, and Emily could disappear into the system. Or worse. The anguish in his voice was palpable, and Sarah could see the love he had for his niece, the desperation to protect her driving every decision he made. Outside the interrogation room, Detective Rodriguez watched through the two-way mirror, his experienced eyes catching every nuance of the conversation. This goes deeper than we thought, he muttered to the forensic analyst beside him, who nodded in agreement. If he's telling the truth, the analyst replied. We're looking at a case that could rewrite everything we know about local criminal networks. This could expose connections that go all the way up. Back in the room, Mark continued to talk. Each word was a brick being laid in the foundation of a case that could bring down a powerful syndicate. They've got people everywhere, he warned. I saw them at a bar near the shipping yard. They were meeting with some city officials, discussing contracts and favors. It's all tied together, and they're not afraid to get their hands dirty. Do you have any names? Sarah asked, her heart racing at the thought of uncovering corruption at such a high level. Mark shook his head. I didn't catch names, but it was clear they were planning something big. I overheard them discussing a shipment that could change everything for them, something that could make them untouchable. Mark, this is crucial, Sarah said, her voice filled with urgency. If we can get enough evidence, we can take down Carlos and anyone involved. But we need your cooperation. Can you help us set up a meeting, act as a liaison? Mark's face fell, a shadow of fear crossing his features. I don't know if I can do that. If they suspect anything, they won't hesitate to hurt me or Emily. They'll know I talked. Then we need to create a plan, Sarah replied, her mind racing with possibilities. We can use you as an informant, but we have to do it carefully. You'll have to gain their trust again, but we'll provide protection every step of the way. Mark looked torn, his emotions laid bare for Sarah to see. I just want to keep her safe. I can't let anything happen to Emily. She's all I have left. And we'll make sure nothing happens to her, Sarah promised, her voice filled with conviction. But you need to trust us. This is your chance to break free from this cycle and secure a future for both of you. As Mark weighed his options, Sarah could see the gears turning in his mind. The struggle between fear and hope was palpable, and she knew that this was a pivotal moment. If he agreed to help, it could change everything, not just for him, but for Emily too. I'll do it, Mark finally said, his resolve strengthening. I'll help you set up a meeting, but we need to do it soon. I can feel the pressure mounting. Carlos won't wait forever. Good, Sarah replied, a surge of relief washing over her. Let's outline a plan. We'll need to coordinate with the detectives and ensure you have protection. The last thing we want is to put you in danger before we're ready to act. As they began to formulate a strategy, the door swung open, and Detective Rodriguez stepped inside, his expression serious. Sarah, we need to talk, he said, glancing at Mark before turning back to her. We've got a lead on the shipping yard, but we're going to need full cooperation from him if we're going to make this work. Mark looked between them, his anxiety palpable. What's going to happen now? Am I safe? Detective Rodriguez nodded, his demeanor reassuring. We'll ensure your safety, Mark. But the sooner you cooperate, the better. We need solid evidence to build a case. That means working together to set up a sting operation that can catch them in the act. Then let's do it, Mark said, determination seeping into his voice. I'm ready to help take them down. As they worked together to devise a plan, Sarah felt a flicker of hope. This was a turning point, not just in the investigation, but in Mark's life and Emily's future. They were on the cusp of something monumental, and every decision they made would ripple through the network of crime that had ensnared them all. The clock was ticking. With each moment that passed, the danger intensified. Sarah could almost feel the weight of the criminal syndicate pressing down on them, its shadow looming larger with every second. But with Mark's cooperation, they had a chance to cut through that darkness and bring light to a situation that had long been shrouded in fear. As they finalized their plans, Mark's resolve solidified. They would confront the demons of his past, and together, they would fight for Emily's future. The city was draped in a thick blanket of night, the air cool and electric with anticipation. Inside the police station, the mood was far from calm. Detective Rodriguez had called an emergency meeting to brief the team on their plan to catch Carlos and his syndicate in the act. Sarah could feel the tension in the air as officers gathered around the worn conference table, their expressions serious and focused. Mark sat in a corner, his hands trembling slightly as he listened. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on him. He was about to step into a world that had already threatened his life and the life of his niece. A part of him was terrified, but another part was fueled by a desperate hope that this could finally be the end of their nightmare. The thought of Emily, innocent and unaware of the chaos swirling around her, pushed him to muster every ounce of courage he had. Listen up, everyone, Rodriguez began, his voice cutting through the murmur of apprehension. We have a chance to take down a major player in the drug and information trafficking network. Mark has agreed to help us set up a meeting with Carlos and his associates at the shipping yard. This is our opportunity to gather evidence and make arrests." The officers nodded, their expressions a mix of determination and wariness. But Sarah noticed a flicker of doubt in some of their eyes. They had all seen how dangerous Carlos was, and the risks that came with infiltrating his operation were significant. Sarah understood their hesitance. This was not just another routine bust. This was a confrontation with a criminal empire that had thrived in the shadows, and they were about to shine a spotlight on it. "Mark," Rodriguez said, turning his attention to him, "can you confirm the date and time of the meeting?" Mark took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. "They're planning to meet tomorrow night," he replied, his voice gaining strength. "Carlos doesn't trust anyone, but he trusts me to deliver the packages. It's a routine for him." "Good," Sarah interjected, her mind racing with possibilities. "We'll have surveillance teams in place to monitor the area. We can set up a perimeter to keep an eye on all entrances and exits. We need to know exactly who's attending this meeting." Rodriguez nodded. "We'll have officers stationed nearby, ready to move in as soon as we get the signal. Mark, we'll be in constant communication with you through a secure line. If anything feels off, you need to let us know immediately." As the meeting progressed, Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the moment they had been preparing for. However, the weight of responsibility pressed down on her. She had to ensure Mark's safety while also gathering the evidence they needed to dismantle the syndicate. "Mark, I want you to remember to stay calm," she said, her voice softening, trying to instill confidence in him. "If things get tense, just follow the plan. We'll be right there with you." Mark nodded, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. "I know. I can't let anything happen to Emily. She's counting on me." The thought of Emily, vulnerable and unaware of the storm brewing around her, added an extra layer of urgency to Sarah's determination. "We won't let anything happen to her," she promised, her heart aching for the little girl who had already lost so much. "But you need to be focused. This is the only chance we have." Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Sarah and Rodriguez prepared for the operation. They double-checked equipment, ensuring that surveillance cameras were ready and communication devices were functional. The atmosphere was tense, filled with the weight of unspoken fears and hopes. As they geared up, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled in her stomach. She knew the risks involved, not just for Mark, but for everyone in the line of duty. The criminal world they were about to confront was ruthless, and the stakes were higher than ever. "Are you ready?" Rodriguez asked, his voice low as they moved to the exit, their footsteps echoing in the hall. Sarah took a deep breath, summoning her resolve. "As ready as I'll ever be." The drive to the shipping yard was filled with a palpable energy. The streets of the city were alive, yet Sarah felt a disconnect, as if they were entering a different world entirely. The closer they got to the meeting point, the more her heart raced. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, the realization that they were about to confront a dangerous foe who would stop at nothing to protect his empire. When they arrived at the shipping yard, Sarah's pulse quickened. The area was dimly lit, shadows stretching long across the concrete as the night wrapped itself around them. She could see the outlines of large containers stacked high, the sound of shifting metal echoing through the night air. The scent of salt water lingered in the breeze, mixing with the tension that hung thick in the atmosphere. "Mark should be arriving soon," Rodriguez said, scanning the area for any signs of movement. "Let's take our positions." We need to be ready for anything. They set up in a nearby van, its windows tinted to conceal their presence. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Sarah adjusted her earpiece, ensuring she could communicate with Mark without drawing attention. "Remember, Mark," she spoke into the mic, her voice steady. "Stay close to the meeting point, but don't engage unless it's absolutely necessary. We'll be watching your back." "I won't forget," Mark replied, his voice slightly shaky. "I'll just act like I'm delivering the package. I'll keep it casual, but I'll be on the lookout." Minutes felt like hours as they waited, the tension building with every passing second. The shadows seemed to dance around them, and the sounds of the night faded into a heavy silence. Finally, Sarah spotted a familiar figure in the distance. Carlos approached, flanked by two men who exuded an air of danger. Victor, the muscle Mark had described, was unmistakable, a towering figure with a menacing presence. Beside him was Sam, his youthful face illuminated by the glow of his phone as he scrolled through messages, oblivious to the world around him. "Here we go," Rodriguez said, his voice low as he tightened his grip on the radio. "Stay sharp." Mark stepped forward, visibly nervous but determined. He approached Carlos with a casual air, holding the package close to his side. "Hey, Carlos," he called out, forcing a confident tone into his voice. "Got the delivery you asked for?" Carlos turned, a smug smile spreading across his face. "Mark, you're just in time. We were starting to wonder if you'd show. You know how important this shipment is." As the conversation unfolded, Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline. Mark kept it light, joking about the delays he encountered while trying to maintain an eye on the men surrounding Carlos. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he glanced toward the van as if seeking reassurance. The clock was ticking, and every second counted. "Let's see what you've got," Carlos said, his eyes narrowing as he reached for the package. "You know we don't like surprises." Mark forced a smile, his voice steady as he replied, "No surprises here, just the usual." He handed over the package, his pulse racing as he felt the weight of their situation. The moment felt surreal, a culmination of the fears and hopes that had brought them all to this point. As Carlos inspected the contents, Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline. This was the moment they had been waiting for. She signaled to Rodriguez, who began to ready the team for action. But then, everything changed. Mark's expression shifted abruptly. He caught a glimpse of something behind Carlos, a movement, a flicker of light that sent a jolt of panic through him. "Wait!" he shouted, his voice rising above the din. "Something's not right." In an instant, chaos erupted. Carlos's men sprang into action, eyes darting around as they sensed a disturbance. Mark stepped back, adrenaline surging through him as he shouted into his earpiece. "They're onto us. We need backup now." Rodriguez's voice crackled through the radio. "Hold your position. We're coming." The situation devolved into pandemonium. Sarah's heart raced as she watched Mark back away, desperately trying to maintain composure while the tension escalated. Carlos's face contorted with rage as he realized something was amiss. "Get him!" Carlos yelled, pointing at Mark, who was now sprinting toward the van, a mix of fear and determination propelling him forward. Time seemed to slow as Sarah's instincts kicked in. "Go! Go! Go!" she shouted, throwing open the van door and rushing out, her heart pounding in her chest. The officers sprang into action, rushing to surround the area. Mark reached the van just as the first shots rang out, the crack of gunfire echoing through the night. "Get down!" Sarah yelled, shoving Mark behind the safety of the vehicle. The chaos was overwhelming, and the air was thick with gunpowder and fear as bullets ricocheted off nearby containers. As the officers moved in, Sarah's training took over. She directed her team, shouting orders and coordinating their movements. "Flank left, cover the right side," she barked, her voice cutting through the chaos, filled with authority and urgency. In the midst of the firefight, Mark's fear turned to determination. He had come too far to turn back now. He kept his head low, peering around the van to catch glimpses of Carlos and his men, who were scrambling for cover as they tried to regain control of the situation. "Mark, stay behind cover," Sarah yelled, her heart racing as she saw him trying to maneuver for a better position. "We'll handle this." But Mark was fueled by a fierce protectiveness for Emily. He couldn't let them get away. As the gunfire continued, he made a split-second decision. He couldn't allow Carlos to escape. He knew they had to take him down now or risk losing everything. With a deep breath, he charged out from behind the van, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "This ends tonight," he shouted, his voice ringing with a newfound resolve, echoing in the chaos around him. "Mark, no!" Sarah screamed, but it was too late. He had already launched himself into action, determined to confront the very man who had put his life and the life of his niece in jeopardy. The scene erupted into a blur of motion. Mark ducked behind a stack of crates, using the cover to his advantage as he tried to assess the situation. He could see Carlos barking orders at his men, who were scrambling to regroup. The realization hit him like a punch. This was a chance to not only save himself, but to dismantle the threat looming over Emily's life. "Stay down, Mark," Sarah shouted, her voice filled with urgency as she tried to maintain control of the situation. "Let us handle this." But Mark's resolve was unshakable. He had witnessed too much suffering already, and he could not let fear dictate his actions any longer. He could feel the weight of the package in his hands, an object that had become a symbol of his struggle. And he knew he had to act before it was too late. In that moment, something shifted in Mark. The fear that had once paralyzed him transformed into a fierce determination. He had spent too long living in the shadows, too long allowing himself to be a pawn in someone else's game. No more. He was ready to take control of his fate. Drawing on every ounce of courage he had, Mark made a break for it, sprinting toward Carlos. He saw the surprise in Carlos's eyes as he charged forward, the element of surprise momentarily on his side. "Mark, don't!" Sarah yelled, panic surging through her as she watched him rush into the fray. But there was no stopping him now. In that electrifying moment, as Mark barreled toward Carlos, the world around him faded away. All that mattered was confronting the man who had caused him and his family so much pain. As he closed the distance, he felt a rush of adrenaline, a mix of fear and exhilaration propelling him forward. "Enough!" Mark shouted, his voice ringing out through the chaos. "You're not going to hurt anyone else." Carlos turned, surprise quickly morphing into rage. "You think you can stop me?" he sneered, pulling a weapon from his belt. The sight of the gun sent a wave of dread crashing over Mark, but he refused to back down. In an instant, the world erupted around them. The sound of gunfire filled the air, echoing through the shipping yard as officers moved in, their training kicking into gear. Sarah's heart raced as she watched the scene unfold, her instincts screaming at her to protect Mark while also ensuring the safety of her team. "Cover him!" Rodriguez shouted, barking orders as he directed officers to flank Carlos and his men, trying to contain the chaos. "We need to control this situation before it spirals out of hand." Mark didn't hesitate. In a moment of clarity, he lunged forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He had come too far to turn back now. He had to confront this monster, the man who had turned his life upside down. As he reached Carlos, the world around him blurred into a haze of movement and sound. Mark felt a surge of adrenaline as he tackled Carlos to the ground, the two men crashing into a heap of crates. The impact knocked the wind out of him, but he didn't care. This was his moment, and he was determined to make it count. "Get him!" Sarah shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos as she moved to join the fray, her training guiding her every move. She knew they had to subdue Carlos before he could react, before he could unleash the violence that lurked just beneath the surface. With a quick glance at Mark, Sarah felt a surge of pride mixed with fear. He was risking everything for his niece, for a future that seemed uncertain. She had to ensure he made it through this alive. The struggle was fierce. Mark grappled with Carlos, adrenaline surging through him as he fought to gain the upper hand. He could feel the weight of the package pressing against him, a reminder of everything he was fighting for. With a surge of strength, he managed to pin Carlos down, his heart racing as he locked eyes with the man who had terrorized his life. "Enough!" Mark shouted, his voice filled with raw emotion. "You're done." But Carlos was far from finished. He struggled beneath Mark's grip, a look of fury in his eyes. "You think this is over? You have no idea what you're getting into." The menace in his tone sent a chill down Mark's spine, but he couldn't let fear control him any longer. "Get back!" Sarah yelled as she and Rodriguez moved in, ready to subdue Carlos and his men. Officers were streaming in from all directions, their presence bolstering Mark's resolve. This was no longer just his fight. It was a fight for justice, for Emily, and for everyone who had suffered at the hands of men like Carlos. The struggle intensified, and Mark could hear the chaos around him, the sounds of shouting, the crack of gunfire, and the heavy thud of footsteps as officers rushed in to contain the situation. In that moment, he felt a sense of purpose wash over him. He was not alone in this fight, and together, they would bring down Carlos and his syndicate. As the officers closed in, Mark felt the weight of the world begin to lift. They had the element of surprise, and with their combined efforts, they could finally dismantle the network that had threatened to consume them all. "Secure the area," Rodriguez shouted, his voice booming over the chaos. "We need to apprehend everyone involved." In that moment, the tide began to turn. Mark felt the adrenaline coursing through his veins, and as Carlos's men realized the situation was slipping away from them, panic set in. Officers moved in swiftly, apprehending the remaining members of the syndicate while ensuring Mark's safety. As Mark finally stood up, breathing heavily, he looked around at the chaos that had unfolded. The once dark and foreboding shipping yard was now illuminated by the flash of police lights, a stark contrast to the shadows that had lingered just moments before. "Are you okay?" Sarah rushed to his side, her expression a mix of concern and relief. The adrenaline in her system made her heart race as she assessed Mark's condition. He looked shaken but determined, and the fire in his eyes told her he was ready to see this through to the end. "I'm fine," Mark replied, though his voice trembled slightly. I couldn't let him get away. Not after everything he's done." Sarah nodded, understanding the weight of his words. Together, they had faced the darkness, and now they stood at the precipice of a new beginning. The battle was far from over, but they had taken the first step toward reclaiming their lives and ensuring a safe future for Emily. As the officers continued to secure the area, Mark's heart swelled with gratitude. He had faced his fears, and with the help of Sarah and the team, he had taken a stand against the very forces that had threatened to destroy him. The fight was far from over, but together, They had forged a path forward, one that offered a glimmer of hope in a world that had once seemed so dark.